Welcome to Wellness and Dentistry. I'm your co-host, Dr. Martin Mendelson, a disabled dentist, coach, speaker, and thought leader. And I'm joined by my co-host and friend, Dr. Kyle Stanley, who's a dentist, tech entrepreneur, speaker, and researcher. And together, we've helped thousands of dental professionals pursue wellness in dentistry, both here as part of our podcast and also in our 2-day in-person workshop called Lightside Live, which we're super excited to be doing once again this coming November in Southern California on November 1st and 2nd. If you want more information on that, simply go to wellnessanddentistry.com and you'll find a link to our live course. Now, what we're going to be talking about today, however, is dental addiction. In other words, talking about dentistry and thinking about dentistry 24/7, the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what do you think about dental addiction, Dr. Stanley?
Yeah, it is, I think, a huge problem in our profession.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons is because it takes so long to become a dentist.
Yeah.
You have to do well in high school, you have to do well in college. If you're in the US, you have to do well in your DAT to get into dental school. And then when you're in dental school, you have to go to night clinic, you have to be there on the weekends, you have to do multiple wax ups, you have to pass your boards, you have to pass part 1 boards, pass part 2 boards. There's so many freaking steps to get to that point that once you get there and you're finally a dental professional, you're a dentist, you're a specialist, whatever you turn out to be, we equate our identity with our profession.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like I joke around about this in my keynotes where I say, you go to a party and people find out you're a dentist or in dentistry, and all of a sudden they lift their lip up and they say, hey, can you look at this? Or they start complaining about the dentist down the street whose name they half the time don't remember. And they're convinced they're just trying to buy another Porsche, right? No offense, Kyle.
Yeah,
But
one ticket.
right. So, it's a real thing. And the challenge becomes, because let's be clear, Kyle and I aren't sitting here in judgment about people who think dentistry 24/7 necessarily. What we're doing is we're just challenging the thought process around what else might there be within our lives. How might this be affecting our mental health? How might this be affecting our relationships? I think that's kind of the purpose of today, to just kind of be the challengers and the coaches to go, hey, let's tap the brakes a little bit if all we're doing is thinking about dentistry, right?
Well, I loved your language, how you said our, we, us, because I am a recovering dental, an addicted person. I was addicted to dentistry for sure. And I think this was part of my downfall. This was why I had burnout and why I went through depression and why I went through anxiety, was because when you think about addiction, there's many different definitions of addiction, but I know one of them is when it starts to get in the way of your personal life.
Yeah.
Right. So like we both know people that can drink on occasion, right? We know people that maybe even smoke on occasion.
Yep.
Which of course, neither one of them is good. And we know that, and we have the research and all that, but when does it become an addiction? When does it become a problem?
Right.
Is when you start leaving work to go drinking, when you're drinking and driving, when, or like a gambling addict, right? Like we know people that can go to Vegas and gamble for the weekend and, have fun and leave.
Absolutely.
But then there's people that are waking up in the middle of the night doing online gambling, and they're, leveraging their homes to gamble. Like that's when it becomes a problem.
Yep.
And we all know that when we look at substance abuse or when we look at gambling addiction or sex addiction or something like this, but I don't think many dentists think about what they're doing with their profession, with dentistry, when it gets in the way of their personal lives. Because I was like this. I just would say I'll get up early and I'll come home late, and I'll miss dinners with my family, mornings with my kids, going to funerals, going to family parties, because I'm sacrificing that for my addiction, which was my profession.
100%. And there are so many stories of those of us within dentistry and outside of dentistry that were successful by living and breathing what it is they did 24/7. But there's also lots of stories of people that are successful, that have personal boundaries, that, will not, compromise their family or whatnot. I mean, my father, who's still with us as we record this, he's 95. He's not a dentist. He was very successful in the engineering spaces. He was one of the principal engineers on the first nuclear sub. He was the president of engineering for a major jet engine manufacturer. But I do remember when I was a kid, although we worked a lot, he never missed dinner. Believe it or not, he would
Amazing.
drive home from the plant, have dinner with us, because this was in the 70s. I'm dating myself, where like you couldn't work from home. There was no such thing as online anything. So he would drive home. I don't remember, it was like 10, maybe 20 minutes, have dinner with the family, and then go back to work because that's where work was, right?
Mm.
So, and you could argue maybe that's a form of addiction as well, but he also prioritized, right? And so we need to talk about prioritization, and we also need to talk about getting real with ourselves relative to our own systems, right? Because you talk all the time about the data that shows that only about 10% of us take any time off, dentists, which blows my mind. And as I've coached more and more and more dentists, I mean, we're in the thousands at this point, I find a very interesting pattern, which is they very much, and very rightfully so, take a lot of pride and have a lot of responsibility on their practice. So there's a lot to do. But the question becomes, do we have to do it all ourselves? Right? So there's this whole thing that we need to talk about getting real with ourselves, where are we telling ourselves a story that we're the only one that can do it? Or are we just so knee deep in the mud or the weeds that we can't see a different way out? I don't know. It could be different for different people.
Yeah, it makes me think of this idea that there's always a compromise.
Yes.
Like everybody knows someone who's extremely successful financially, right? What was the compromise that they had to give though? Because people will look at these people and say, oh, wow, he or she's got it so great. But they slept on the floor of their first business for 5 years, or in their 20s, they didn't go out because they were the ones doing this. And I'm not saying either way is right or wrong, but just to know that there is a compromise.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
A lot of people hear me speak and they say, well, are you saying that we shouldn't work hard? I mean, you say we shouldn't grind. And I say, no, you should grind, but not indefinitely.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Because you have to grind. I mean, there's periods in your life where you have to say, okay, this period in my life, I'm not going to do XYZ because I'm going to be focusing on ABC.
Absolutely.
But know that there's that compromise. And I think so many of us get into our profession, grind and grind and grind and grind. All of a sudden we look up 7, 10, 15 years later and say, I'm out of shape. My relationships are in a poor place. I have no friends. But my practice is great. And I think that's the kind of success we have to look at. Like, what kind of success do you want to have? Do you want holistic success? Do you want kind of typical consumer success? But know that there's a compromise. So I personally think I would rather grow slower, but not have as many negative aspects.
Yes.
So eventually I'll get to the same place, but not have, hopefully, the divorce, the bad relationships, the poor health. And just know that there's a compromise. But when we get addicted to our profession, it's like if you are at home, well, let me say it like this. The addiction that I had was constantly wanting to get better at dentistry.
Sure.
So I would wake up early, miss mornings with my son and my wife. I didn't have 2 kids at the time. I would listen to dental podcasts on the way to work, get to work, do dentistry for 8 hours, then listen to another dental podcast on the way home, get home, maybe spend 10 minutes with my family if they're going to bed. Then I'd jump on YouTube, watch dental YouTube videos. When I was doing the dishes, I'd probably listen to another dental YouTube video or watch one or listen to one. And then I'd go to my computer and I'd read articles and I'd do CE.
Yep.
And I mean, if this isn't an addiction, I don't know what is. It was like every waking second
Yep.
had to be filled with dentistry. And I think a lot of people mislabel passion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I
passionate about this, so that's why that's why I want to do this. And I would argue that you can be passionate about something without having it take over your life and impact your personal life negatively.
or you could call it there's a place in life for boundaried passion. Boundaried
Mm,
passion, and I have a couple examples. I hadn't thought about it, but it is what I've been doing with myself, particularly as of late. So I like to read. The best reading I get done is on airplanes. That's my life today. I'm on a lot of them, so I have an opportunity to read. But what I do though is if I'm going somewhere to engage with a team or I'm going for a speaking gig or whatever, I'll take a book on coaching or trust or emotional intelligence. No problem. If I'm going somewhere for fun or coming back after the gig is over, it's all pleasure reading or a movie or whatnot because I'm giving myself kind of the break to do it. Um, I have a different example, a clinical one, a clinical practice one from one of my specialist friends. So there was a period of time at Spear where I was almost exclusively working with specialists, hundreds of them. And I'll never forget, I was having a coaching conversation with one of these individuals, surgical specialist. I won't say which one.
yeah.
And they were telling me how they would come home, similar story to you. They'd work all day, they'd come home, they'd have dinner, but then they'd be sitting there doing referral letters till 10 o'clock at night,
Wow.
every night,
Mhm.
because they didn't want to do it during the day because of the structure of their practice. So this started a whole conversation around how other members in this group, this master's program, were actually handling their referral letters. They were using certain systems. They trained certain employees, etc. And here's the take home message. Was it a lot of work in the beginning to learn the software, to program the templates, to train the team? Were there a lot of letters where they basically rewrote the darn thing? Yes. But in the end, where were they? In the end, today, I know for a fact because I asked them recently, they don't do this anymore. So it goes back to what you were saying about there are sometimes needs to grind, but what's the end game? Like how are we grinding? What are we grinding to get to? And is that making our lives better, worse, or the same from a time perspective, right? Um, and I think the other thing you need to consider is a whole ROI discussion, right? Because let's say you take home, I don't know, 200,000 a year, 100,000 a year. The number is irrelevant. The point is that you're paying your bills, okay?
Yeah.
And you are doing, let's say, payroll and other elements of HR. And it's taking X amount of time per week to do it versus hiring a company or a system or whatever that reduces your take home income by $5,000 or $10,000. Is that $10,000 not worth the time with your family? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then okay.
Mhm.
But if the answer is yes, why aren't we spending the money?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it is that idea of the compromise. I think this
Mm-hmm.
example, that specialist, they want the letters to be personal and they want to make sure that they're doing well. And they see it as like, I'm passionate about this. I
Yep.
care for my referrals. I care for my patients. And I think it's so easy to let that slowly become a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy to have that excuse that, well, this is in the form of giving, or this is in the form of getting better, or self-improvement. You and I both are huge on self-improvement,
Yeah. Yeah.
but this is how I think dentists get in trouble, is that
Well,
they can only think about dentistry. I
mm-hmm.
mean, you see two dent, like it's happened to me on trips or at the beach or something. Someone goes, "Oh, you're a dentist too? Oh, this guy John over here is a dentist also." Oh, okay, yeah. I start talking to him. Where do you practice and where'd you go to school
Mm-hmm.
and this, and then 10 minutes later, it's like, hey, are you using Emacs? And what
Yeah,
thickness are you doing? And when
exactly.
you're using a round burr, are you going at this RPMs? And it's like the only thing we can talk about.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's the case with other professions. I mean, I know many people that are different professions. I don't know that they're as much attached to their profession outside of their profession.
I can say, I go to a lot of coaching and leadership things these days. And I can tell you in that camp, there's a lot of passion to it too. While at the same time, though, within those walls or halls, there's an understanding and recognition of self-care and self-improvement and so forth. So although we may go to a dinner, I'm thinking of a specific example, and talk for half the time about which exercise do you do? Oh, you use the trust one? Well, which one did you use? And how did that work? And what did you do first? And blah, 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 blah. And how did the client take it? Blah, blah. We absolutely do that.
Yeah.
But then we're also like, so where are you going next for fun? And oh my gosh, I've been
Mhm.
to London or whatever. So I think it depends on the profession to a large degree, but I think any profession where there's a passion associated with it, there's a danger of it, right?
Maybe that's it. Maybe that is the ticket that because our profession has an artistic aspect to
Yeah.
it or has a physical form, um, I mean, we're science and arts, and we're a little bit architects of the mouth, right? Maybe that's why.
Well, I'll go
I've
one
never thought about that.
further. I'll go
Yeah,
one
please.
further. I think it's deeper than that. I think it's that and farther. We were so ingrained in dental school that almost good enough is never enough.
Yeah.
And so it's this constant, how can I be better? Which is not a bad thing. How can I be better is a wonderful self development statement if you're acknowledging what you just did as progress. The minute you start saying that's not good enough, what can I do next time? That's when we run into problems. So I think part of it is ingrained in dental school to a large degree. Because we don't have the time to enjoy our wins, right? We go on to the next thing and go on to the next thing,
Yeah, the
which
next patient's ready.
exactly,
That's one
exactly.
thing that I think is hard for so many dentists is if you treated one patient a day, and then
Hmm.
when you finish, you put that crown in, the implant crown, the denture fit, and you just got to say like, wow, I put all
Hmm.
that work in, all that time in. My lab did such a great job. My assistants did such a good job. The patient was so nice and the bite's good. And we're going to be
Hmm.
able to really, we made a huge difference in this patient's life,
Totally.
right? And we can look at it and take pictures and say, gosh, that's great. But when you place the crown, patient bites, yeah, okay, everything is good. You don't have time because your assistant's coming in and say, oh, doc, Mrs. Jones is ready in room 2. And then, he or she has this big problem, right? So you
Totally.
just go problem to problem to problem when I think at the heart of it, so many of us dentists are passionate about this. We're passionate about our hand skills, our
Hmm.
abilities, just like how someone who is a woodworker or is
Hmm.
a visual artist,
Hmm.
or, like our medical colleagues that are surgeons.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think too, a tool really to help, when you're going through your day, because I deal with this a lot. Because look, people who are engaging me or you for coaching feel that they need some kind of assistance in some way. And one of the key things that I've seen be very transformative for dentists is really acknowledging all the things that went well on a given day.
Mm,
And so I'm not sitting here saying we need to wear rose colored glasses, but what I am saying is we need to give the good stuff as much power as we give to the bad stuff. And so when we start focusing on the good stuff, Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, frequency bias, that's what we see. If all we're going to do is look for the problems, the challenges, the exceptions, then that's what we're going to see. That's why when I talk about morning huddles or as Spear calls it perfect day meetings, I beg people, great, do it. Talk about the things that you want to avoid problems with. the exceptions. Great. Talk about all that stuff. But please, for the love of all that's holy, talk about the good stuff too. Because if we don't, all we're going to see is problems. It's just the way the mind works. It's not, it just is what it is. Right.
As you
So,
were saying that, I was thinking of how we dentists harp on our complications,
yeah.
and our failures and our revisions.
Mhm.
But when you ask most dentists, what is your failure rate, if they track it? I mean,
Mhm.
you probably know this from a lab side, and I do know the numbers on remakes for our lab,
Mhm.
and it's less than 2%.
Yeah.
And I usually extend that in clinical realm because that's the lab side only. That's not what happens in the mouth,
Sure.
of course. But I know when I was tracking mine in my own practice, it was about 3%.
Mhm.
3% of cases had something where I had to go back in and do
Yeah.
something, or change the shade, or change the restoration, or redo the implant, or redo the bone graft, or blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And what's crazy is, for me, this was a major part of my burnout.
Mm.
And think
Talk more
about
about
how
that.
97% of my practice, clinical practice, let's say, okay, not including relationships and whatnot, went really well.
Mhm.
3% of my practice, I had problems, but those 3% were the ones that brought me down.
Absolutely. So let me give everybody a tool. And this goes back to what I was just saying about this pattern that I've noticed. If you've had a bad day at the practice and you're like, no, you don't understand, Martin. I had 3 patients in a row that were of challenge in one form or another. Great. How many total patients did you interact with today?
Yeah.
And how many total procedures did you do? And how well did those go? And so the question I challenge everybody to ask themselves is, great, so why aren't we looking at that versus the other stuff? They're both valid. But see, this is what we do. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about us as dentists always wanted to be better and seek improvement.
Mhm.
We look to the failures as more demonstrative of opportunities to improve versus focusing on what went well and being cognitive of doing that again so things go well in the future. My good friend Darren Deester at Spear, he taught me something when I would get up in front of people, and I still do this today at the summit. When we ask people to fill out the evaluations, I think this is brilliant. He says, listen, we want to make sure that we give you what it is you're looking to get out of this experience. So although we want to understand what it is you'd like us to improve, we also want to know the things that we did well. Because guess what? We want to give you more of that stuff and less of the other.
That's a
And I
great
think
point.
it's a life lesson, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. That's a great point.
And I think that for those listening, because I was thinking this myself, were we getting off on a tangent on this focus stuff? And I actually don't think we are, because I think that this discussion about where you're focused on the opportunities for improvement, the things that gone well, et cetera, that kind of fuels a level of harmony, a level of contentment, so that you can feel good enough to leave the practice behind and spend time with your spouse and children at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I like how you finished that, because the biggest thing that changed my perspective on all of this, and that I see with people that take our courses or our coaching, is these people really separate their profession from their purpose in life, their
Mhm.
profession from their identity. Their profession is part of their identity, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
You spend so much time and effort and money doing this, but it's not all of it.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes very easy to get addicted to dentistry when your entire identity
Yeah.
is aligned with dentistry. And what I say in my courses is, you don't only do this once. It's just like a traditional addiction.
Mhm.
You know, anybody that has gone through AA or Narcotics Anonymous or anything like
Yep.
this knows that you're never recovered.
Mm-mm.
You're recovering.
I mean,
And
I'm in recovering. I stopped drinking May 28th of 2015. And I can tell you, it in all candor, there are times where, you sit there. I've sat there and I thought to myself, man, if I still drank, I'd be having a drink right now. And
Mhm.
and by the way, that's for the good stuff as well as the bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I drank more in good times and bad times. I can actually think of a lot of really awful, awful, awful days where the last thing I wanted to do was drink.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, I was
Yeah.
more like, let's celebrate, and then I became the angry drunk. But that's another
Hmm.
story. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it never goes away. And so, the question is, it's like, what do I want my life to look like? And is my life in balance? So, um, people listening, go ahead and Google, life wheel or wheel of life. There's lots of examples. And around the edges, it says, work, family, social relationships, intimate relationships, finances, personal. There's a whole bunch of different versions. And then the spokes are a scale from 0 to 10, 0 meaning none, 10 being max. And you basically circle where you are in all these different areas. And for most people, it ain't a circular wheel, right? It's like, "Argh." And
Yeah.
so the question then becomes, how well would you be able to roll down the hill in that thing? So, how can we create greater levels of balance to either bring things in or expand things, depending, to create a greater level of balance within your life? Now, I can't help myself, but we got to quote Steve Uzel at this point, where he says, multitasking is merely the opportunity to screw up more than one thing at a time. And so when I
That's
say
right.
balance, I don't actually mean literally. I mean, if you're with your family, be with your family. If you're at the practice, be at the practice. Because if we're focusing on the opposite when we're at the other, then it takes away from that.
Then it's
So
presence.
it's presence. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
presence.
And what I was talking about before with addiction and you're always recovering.
Yeah,
I am a recovered dentistry addict.
yeah,
Okay, no, recovering dentistry
yeah. I
addict.
was going to correct you, but you did it
Yes,
anyway.
thank you. Because what you'll see, and this is why I want to bring awareness to this and just say it out loud, is dentistry will try to suck you in again.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've had people that you and I have worked with where they've worked on their personal growth and development and realized that dentistry is part of their life. It's not who
Hmm.
they are. And
Hmm.
they've gotten their mindset right and they've gotten their personal success habits going well, their practice management well. And then they start a new practice and then they start working 10 hours a day again and they start missing their spouse's important
Hmm.
dinners and there are kids this or that and it can suck you back in. So it's just like health. It's just like addiction
Hmm.
in that you don't just say, well, I'm healthy now. I got to peak health, so I never have
Yeah.
to exercise again.
Yeah.
It is a constant mindset shift, and you have to be ready for dentistry to suck you in again because this even happens to you and I.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We may be saying yes to too many things.
Uh-huh.
We may say yes to too many podcasts or too many speaking events or taking on too
Yep.
many coaching clients or teaching too many courses.
Hmm.
And sometimes I have to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, I made a mistake and now I need to fix
Yep.
it. And if I can't fix it at that time, then I need to set a time where I'm going to reverse things.
Hmm.
But it is that awareness. And that's why I
Oh,
want to
yeah.
harp on this episode is you have to first think and be very honest with yourself. Am I addicted to dentistry?
Hmm.
And don't use the excuse, this is my profession. Don't use the excuse, but I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once you say it out loud, yes, I
Yeah.
am Kyle. I am addicted to dentistry. Um, it it can set you free a little bit.
It can. And let's go back to something you said earlier about, like, it is okay to grind at times, right?
Yes.
So I know what neither of us is saying is that we don't want you to focus on self-improvement in the clinical or practice management realm. However, by the same token, is we don't want you to get sucked up in it. So if there's going to be something that you want to bring into your practice, whether it's clinical or management wise, right? And you've determined that you want to do this for X, Y, and Z reasons, and we will have the ROI of having this knowledge for A, B, and C purposes, and it's going to take us 6 months to focus on, go for it all day long with those boundaries. Now, what's the fun part here is that, if you set a goal and you write it down, you're about 46% more likely to get there. If you have social accountability, so let's say you share it with your spouse or your dental business partner, now you're upwards of 65%. If you set a deadline, you're now upwards of 95% of the likelihood to achieve the goal. So what if we could use that to our advantage? We say, we're not going to be addicted to dentistry, but we're also not going to shy away from improvement. But we're going to do improvement with intention, with time and space setting, deadline expectations. And then when we're done with that, we're going to take a break for a little while. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
No, I like that because I think that helps a lot of us that are these lifelong learners,
Yeah,
constant improvers. And I
absolutely.
think that comes from just what I started out this episode with, which is it takes us so long to get to our degree and our title that we're so used to constantly learning and getting
Mhm.
better. It's
Mhm.
very hard to stop us from getting better. And many of us are overachievers, so
Yep,
we love the feeling of achievement. And
absolutely.
so I think I'm glad you said that because I think if a lot of people just listen to the beginning of this podcast, they may say, well, they don't want us to get better. We're just supposed to stay where we are. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no way I could do that. So
Mhm.
I'm just going to keep doing the same
Yeah.
thing.
So here's an interesting idea, and I'm totally in this headspace because I was just working on my leadership video scripts for my series that's coming out. So what would it be like for folks to actually take a time and effort inventory of the time and effort they're spending learning dentistry? And so what do I mean by that? Let's take the example that you gave earlier where you would drive home and listen to a podcast, you'd get home, then you'd listen to one while you're doing the dishes, blah, blah, blah. If you really think, if you really feel in your heart of hearts that it's like, I need to back off from this, well, we're all analytical types. Analyze it. Look at, let's say for, depending on your situation, a week, maybe a month. What am I doing outside clinical hours? How long am I doing it outside of clinical hours? Right? Once we have all that down, then we can ask ourselves, what else could I be doing with that same amount of time if I chose to do something different? Oh my gosh, you live in a beach town. It could be I could go for a walk on the beach with my wife and family. Oh my gosh, how cool is that? Or, go for a walk in a park if you live near a park, that kind of thing. So, you know, any decision that we make in life is made best with information and thought, right? So if we've decided that we need to make a different decision, then let's make the decision with data. Let's make it evidence-based. Let's take the time, as silly as it might sound, to journal how we're spending our time to then understand what the opportunities are on the other side of it, right?
Yeah, and I like that you said that because I think that will appeal to our listeners because we're dental professionals. We
Yeah.
like research. We like
Yep.
numbers. We like
Yep.
recipes. We like etch for 20 seconds, rinse for
Yep.
10 seconds,
Yep.
bond for this many, cure for
Yep.
this many. We like that stuff. And I think why dentists will be good at this is because we're very good at understanding compromises.
Mm-hmm.
We always know, okay, if I prep deeper on this, then I can get a thicker restoration, so then it may be
Mm-hmm.
stronger. However, if I prep deeper, I'm more likely to be closer to the pulp and may need root canal at this point. If I place this implant deeper, yes, I may have less bone loss. However, it's going to be harder to take the impression because there may be bone going over
Yep.
the implant neck. We're always making these balanced decisions
Mm-hmm.
in clinical practice. And I think if we use that more in our personal lives,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I mean, dentists are fantastic at this. They're
Mm-hmm.
really, really good at this.
Yeah.
Do we do an inlay here? Okay, well, that's good because we're saving tooth structure. However, there may be some other reason, then maybe there's more likelihood of having a fracture or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
very good at doing this, and we can think about this on the spot all the
Yeah.
time.
Totally.
Do I do a bridge? Do I do an implant? I mean, we can make these comparisons and these compromises, and we know that you have to give something to get something in clinical dentistry,
Hmm.
but we have to have that awareness in our personal lives. And I like how you
Yes.
said that, because it's the same thing, prepping deeper to get a thicker restoration. Okay, that's stronger, but now you're
Right.
closer to the pulp and
Right.
maybe there's more
Right.
sensitivity.
Yep.
That is that example that you gave of, well, once I got home, if I didn't take an hour to watch a YouTube video on doing my veneer preps better, what could I do with that hour? I
Hmm.
could go to the gym and exercise more and maybe feel
Hmm.
better, look better,
Hmm.
and sleep
Hmm.
better. Or maybe I could, have watch a movie with my spouse and cuddle and connect and build
Yep.
that relationship. And
Yep.
how does that impact our children long term? And how does that bring us together? And you just have to know that once your profession gets in the way of your personal life, you have to know what you're taking away from your personal life to get
Yes.
this money or power or prestige or whatever it is you're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. I love the example you just gave because that led into something that I was hoping we were going to get to, which we just did, which is this. We got to be careful around judgment of how much time we're engaging with these things, particularly as we begin. So you just talked about maybe you don't watch that hour-long video and you spend time with your spouse. Even if you took one night a week in the beginning, that's 4 hours a month. That's over a week worth of time in a year that you wouldn't have spent with your spouse that you are consciously choosing to spend today. The power of compound time is immeasurable. Well, it's measurable, but it's behaviorally or from a mental health perspective is immeasurable, right?
Yes.
So even if you can start small, or I would frankly recommend you start small with one night a week or one day, one weekend day, whatever it is, over time, that's going to compound to a much greater amount of time spent than you ever thought was possible. Right.
And going back to relating this to like traditional addiction, what did they say? One step at a time,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
One day at a time
Mm-hmm.
in addiction and
Yep.
AA or Narcotics Anonymous or anything like this. It's always
Yep.
you're doing one day at a time. And
Exactly.
I think that's how we need to think about it in our professional lives. The people that go through my courses and your coaching and this, they don't cold turkey stuff. They
No.
start with doing one thing at a time. I
Yeah.
mean, I had someone message me recently that she signed up for my course in January. She just got through it in June,
Yep.
but over those 6 months,
Yeah.
she's changed little things. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it's compound interest. Her life has
Absolutely.
gotten way better because of these small little things that she changed.
Yeah.
She didn't just say,
So
all of a sudden, I'm never doing anything at home. I'm never working from home. I'm never watching, a YouTube video. Every time I leave the practice, all of my effort is now with my family and my spouse. No.
yeah, good luck with that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good luck. Yeah.
It's it has to be a it has to be a slow progression. Some people
Absolutely.
take my course and they do it in honestly a day. Sometimes people do it in a day, and sometimes people do it in 6 months.
Yeah. 100%.
But it's
100%.
how you implement this.
Yeah. And, those small changes matter over time. Like, you and I were talking last week. I got this amazing case study back from one of my clients who's a dentist. And he was talking about how we were comparing his emotional intelligence assessment in the beginning versus about 18 months later. And he even says in the case study about, some days he didn't feel like he was making any progress or that it was really, really small. But that incremental change, if you think about it as like trying to cross a desert, for some reason, Dune is in my head. I don't know why. You
Hmm.
think yourself crossing a desert, like whether you take 20 steps a day and then 2 steps and then 3 steps and then 40 steps, you're still moving forward,
Yes.
right? So it goes back to this judgment thing. Like just spend the time and worry about the amount later. The important thing is the effort if it's something that's important to you that you want to make a change on. If you're happy where you are, great, like go for it, right? But
That's a
many
great
of us are frankly looking for something different, looking for deeper meaning or expanded meaning. And if that's the case, then you could consider what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, I like how you said that. Thrive. If you're thriving, don't change anything.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if your relationships are good, if you're where you want to be, if you're making the amount of money you want to make, if you're as healthy as you want to be, if you don't have stress, you're not depressed, you don't have anxiety, you feel good about yourself,
Mhm.
don't change anything.
No.
But if you're not, I like how you said that. Your priority has to be set.
Hmm.
Once you set your priorities, that can be your North Star of, oh, okay, I want to be home more. I want to spend more time with my spouse. So what do I need to do to change that?
Right.
And you have to understand that and know the compromises that come along with that.
Correct. Yep.
Because there's
100%.
only 24 hours, really, there's only 16 hours if you're sleeping 8 hours a day. So there's only 16 hours in the day that you can get this, and 8 of it you're probably working.
And we all have the same number of hours in the day. So
Yes.
it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of how we utilize the time, plain and simple.
And you will make time for the things that you prioritize.
Absolutely. I've heard many a speaker say, show me your calendar and your checkbook, so to speak, and I'll tell you what's important to you.
Yeah, I heard something recently that I really liked that said, if you're trying to change your life in some way, whether it's exercising more, eating right,
Hmm.
working on practice management and anything, you have to change your identity
Yeah.
to think that, like, let's give the example of going to the gym. Going to the gym is difficult. It isn't easy to get there many times. It takes some time. You got to be there for a little bit. Could be doing other things.
Hmm.
But I really like this when I heard this last week on a podcast. They said, change your identity to say, I am the person now that goes to the gym 5 days a week.
Yeah.
That's
It's
my identity.
it's
That's part of
ide-
my identity, not
yeah,
your
it's
entire identity.
identity-based habits versus outcome-based habits that Duhigg talks about in The Power of Habit. Yeah, it's 100%.
Yes.
Sorry. James Clear talks about it in Atomic Habits. My apologies.
Oh, nice. Yeah, even
Yeah,
also a great book.
yeah, they're both amazing.
So, what final thoughts do we have about the question? I think everyone should ask this question. Are you addicted to dentistry?
Yeah. And I would say, am I addicted to dentistry? Am I spending the time in the way that I really envision for myself? I'm not talking about idyllic. I'm not talking about, am I spending my days in a way that if I was to, talk to myself 20 years from now, I'd say, I'm really proud of you that this is how you spent your days.
You took the words out of my mouth, and that's how I'm thinking about it too.
Yeah.
I'm very big on going to the gym, especially this year. I've made it one of my big goals of this year is to get in incredible shape is really my goal. Not like
Mm-hmm.
get in shape, but be in incredible shape. That's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times when I put my son to bed and I'm laying in bed with him and I'm like, oh, this is really comfortable. And I could just fall asleep right now at,
Right.
8 and I don't need 12 hours, but hey, why not, And
Yep.
then I have to say, like, will my future self look back
Yep.
on today and say, wow, Kyle, you did the hard thing, the
Mm-hmm.
challenging thing, but look at what I
Yeah.
got you.
Well, and it also goes back to, give yourself, I always talk about one of my coaches, Karen Sullivan. She says, give yourself grace, not an excuse. And so there are going to be days like let's flip the coin or let's flip the scenario where you're putting your son to bed, you're kind of tired and you're getting over something like honest
Yeah.
to goodness illness. And
Yes.
so you make the decision. It's like, I think my body needs some rest to get over
Yeah.
this versus to physiologically stress it out further at the gym. And I know there's different schools of thought on that, but
Yeah.
that for me at least, see if you agree with me. That for me at least would be an example of grace, not an excuse.
For
Right?
sure.
Yeah.
And I'm very big on giving ourselves grace
Mm-hmm.
because I think when I see dentists talk about practice management or mental
Mm-hmm.
health, and it's always in a lot of absolutes,
Yeah.
you have to take that with a grain of salt that we're
100%.
human. nothing works 100% of the time. Even the stuff that you and I teach doesn't work
Oh,
100% of the
100%.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to be real with it. And I think the more real and raw and honest we are, the more we can connect with our colleagues, the more our patients can connect with us. I was
Hmm.
talking about this on another podcast this morning when I was a guest, talking about how we need to be very real with our patients
Hmm.
about we are not Superman or Superwoman.
Yep. Yep.
And it's the same thing with yourself.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. So fantastic topic.
What closing thoughts?
I really believe, and I do this myself, if you really want to make a change in your life, you have to start with data. So if I want to do more of X, great. What am I doing today? And where can I create time or allow time to facilitate the addition of X into my life? And so hope is not a plan, but being hopeful to encourage your actions is a great way to live.
Yeah, my last thoughts would be that you can love dentistry, you can be passionate about dentistry, but know that it's your profession and it's not who you are.
Amen. I figured you were going to say that. So
Yeah, you heard me say that many, many times.
yeah, I've heard you say that a lot. Yes. And it's true.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. Well, thanks again for joining us for Wellness and Dentistry. Martin and I always have fun hearing from those of you that listen. If you have recommendations on topics you'd like to hear or guests you'd like to have on, please let us know. You can go to wellnessanddentistry.com or you can message us on Instagram, and we'd be happy to hear from you. Go to Wellness and Dentistry also to make sure you join us on the first weekend in November this year for Lightside Live. This is our 2-day workshop where we go deep into all the topics you've talked about. You get all of our frameworks and our scripts, and it is a really transformational experience. The times we've done this in the past have been some of my favorite weekends of teaching. And so make sure to go there, and we'll see you on our next episode. See you later.
See you soon.